I remained at the altar, a ghostly bride in a cloud of expensive lace, while everyone around me whispered, giggled, and pointed at me. And then he appeared. My boss, Julian Croft, the millionaire for whom I'd spent 3 years drawing blueprints, slowly approached from across the room. He leaned toward me, and his whisper burned my skin. "Play with me. Pretend I'm the groom." I bet that coward ran away. And I just clutched the half-open door of the banquet hall, struggling with one single thought: to run. Just turn and run without looking back. Uncle Frank's hoarse voice cut through the stifled, suffocating laughter at the bar. 200 guests at the Ritz-Carlton, and I heard their every whisper as clearly as if they were shouting right in my ear. Poor thing, can you imagine the humiliation? A female voice I couldn't recognize responded, "All that money Gerard spent on the reception, the flowers, the orchestra, and the groom didn't even have the courage to show up." A stifled chuckle. Another. And another. It seemed like the whole damned room vibrated with their caustic, painful curiosity. I closed my eyes, trying to breathe, but the corset was suffocating me. Every breath cut into my ribs. Every second drove me deeper into that abyss of shame from which there was no escape. "I saw him this morning," someone blurted out in the rich, lustful tone reserved for only the juiciest gossip. "At the airport, Terminal 4, JFK, international flights." "No. Did he leave the country? Are you kidding me?" "He ran off to Vegas with his buddies. Here, look at the proof. Look at my phone." The whispers grew like a wave, bringing with them nervous laughter, false sighs, and increasingly merciless comments. I felt my legs buckle under the weight of yards and yards of French lace. The bouquet of white roses slipped from my numb fingers and fell with a dull thud to the floor. Chloe, my best friend, instantly leaned over to catch it. "Quiet, quiet, Sophie. Don't listen to them," she whispered, desperately squeezing my hand. "They're a bunch of idiots. We're calling it off. Right now. We'll say that there's been an emergency." "An emergency?" My own voice cracked. "What kind of emergency explains the groom vanishing 2 hours before the wedding?" "They already know, Chloe. Everyone in this room." And it was the absolute truth. Phones were already ablaze with screenshots, videos, and private messages. By tomorrow morning, every former classmate, every forgotten Facebook friend would be drooling over some ugly theory about how Sophia Davis was jilted at the altar. "Hey, guys, seriously," Aunt Carol's shrill voice cut through the air like a rusty knife. "The girl's still hiding out there like a scared mouse. Someone needs to tell her the show's over. Tell Gerard to return the money, and then everyone can go home." "Carol, don't be so insensitive," another voice tried to retort, but without much conviction. "Poor Sophia must be devastated." "Yeah, right. But what do you expect us to do? Sit here all afternoon waiting for a miracle? The groom's run away. The circus is over." Circus. The word hit my head with the force of a hammer. That's what it was for them. A thrilling spectacle. A juicy joke for future family dinners. Remember how Sophia stood at the altar like a fool? Laughter. More laughter. And I will forever be the one who wasn't satisfied with a man simply keeping his word. "Sophia, your dad's coming," Chloe warned, her eyes wide with terror, "and I think he's going to explode." Gerard Davis strode across the room like a wounded bull, throwing over chairs and pushing past guests. His face was purple, the veins in his neck bulging, and his fists clenched so hard his knuckles were white. I knew that expression. It was the same one he'd had when his brother had wrecked his Ferrari. The same one he'd had when he'd found out his partner was stealing from him. The face of a man whose pride had just been trampled in full view. "Where is he?" roared, approaching. "Where's that son of a bitch? I'll kill him. I'll tear him to pieces." "Dad, please," I gasped, but my whisper was drowned out by the din. $500,000, my father shouted, waving his phone at the stunned guests. "I spent $500,000 on this wedding, and that damn coward ran off to Vegas to get drunk with his friends. He posted it on Instagram, bragging about his escape while my daughter waits here for him." The room erupted. It wasn't a whisper anymore. It was shouts, exclamations, a forest of raised phones to film, photograph, and immortalize every second of the worst humiliation of my 28 years. From the other side of the room, my mother ran up, her mascara running in black streams down her cheeks. "My baby, my poor baby," Patricia Davis sobbed, hugging me so tightly she nearly knocked me over. "How could he? How could he do this to you?" "Let me go," I muttered, trying to break free, but her arms squeezed me like steel hoops. "Mom, please, let me go." "I'll sue him," my father barked, furiously dialing the number. "I'll put him behind bars. He'll pay for every cent. He'll regret the day he was born." "Gerard, calm down," Uncle tried to intercede, but it was no use. "Calm down? Calm down? He made a fool of me, my daughter, my entire family, in front of my partners, my clients, in front of—" "I'm sorry." The voice cut through the chaos like a scalpel, sharp, mercilessly precise. Everyone turned. A tall man in an impeccable gray suit walked down the center aisle with measured, confident strides. His presence radiated such effortless authority, as if the very energy in the room had reorganized itself to obey him. The guests instinctively parted, clearing the way. I looked up, wiping away tears with the back of my hand, and felt as if the world had stopped. Julian Croft, my boss, the most sought-after architect in New York, walking straight toward me in the midst of my complete, deafening collapse. "Mr. Croft," I babbled, overcome by a new, chilling wave of shame. "I'm so sorry. You shouldn't have seen that. But he didn't stop. He reached the makeshift altar, turned to the crowd, and spoke in that low, velvety voice I'd heard 1,000 times at meetings, but never like this. Firm, protective, merciless. "My sincere apologies for the delay," he announced, looking at the guests with icy calm. "Traffic on the FDR. An accident blocked 3 lanes. But I'm here. Now." The silence that followed was absolute, deafening. I blinked, confused. Delay? What was he talking about? Julian turned to face me and closed the distance in 2 long strides. He leaned in just enough so that only I could hear his next words. His whisper was so intense that an icy shiver ran down my spine. "Play with me. Pretend I'm the groom." I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. He firmly took my left hand, his fingers intertwining with mine, with a light but undeniable authority. His dark eyes studied my face with the same merciless concentration with which he pored over architectural plans, analyzing every detail, calculating every variable. "Trust me," he added so quietly that the words barely touched the air between us. "Or let me do this for you. It's up to you." My whole world shrank to this moment, to these eyes that looked at me without a shred of pity, without a hint of mockery, without that vile curiosity that was evident in all the other glances. Only cold determination and something else, inexplicable, terrifying. "Julian, you can't," I breathed, feeling 200 pairs of eyes boring into us. "This is madness. You can't just—" "I can, and I plan to. So I need your answer, right now. Do you want them all to leave today with a story about being abandoned, or will you give them an excuse to talk about something completely different?" My father stepped forward, his brows furiously drawn together. "And who are you? What's going on here?" Julian let go of my hand just long enough to extend his to Gerard Davies in a businesslike, impeccable gesture. "Julian Croft, the architect, Sophia's boss, and the man who will marry your daughter today." A collective gasp rolled through the room, deafening as a clap of thunder. My mother, Patricia, staggered, clutching her sister's hand. Father stared at Julian as if he'd just materialized from another dimension. Whispers erupted from all sides, merging into a deafening roar of astonishment, confusion, and utter disbelief. "What the hell?" Father began, but his voice wavered. And Julian had already turned to me again, cutting off the chaos he'd created. He extended an open palm, a silent challenge. Escape. A decision that would turn everything upside down. "It's your choice, Sophia," he repeated, and there was no room for doubt in his voice. "But decide. Now." I looked at that hand, then at my father, crimson with rage and bewilderment, at my mother, who was sobbing silently, at the guests, their phones raised, awaiting the next dose of shame, at Chloe, who stood wide-eyed, completely lost, and through the din, I heard Uncle Frank's hoarse voice again. "Who does this upstart think he is? Superman? Well, the show is getting more interesting." A chuckle, another, and again that all-pervasive, nauseating humiliation. I clenched my teeth, I lifted my chin sharply, and placed my hand in his, so hard that my nails dug into his palm. "Let's do this," I said, my voice firm and clear, for the first time in 3 endless hours. Julian merely nodded slightly, and for a moment, the corner of his lips twitched in a semblance of a smile. Then he turned to the registrar, who had been standing at the altar this whole time, completely stunned. "Sir, may we begin the ceremony? My apologies again for the delay. Traffic, as I mentioned." The registrar blinked several times, looking from Julian to me to my father and back again. I need to check the documents. The birth certificate, the groom's ID, the witnesses' details." "I have everything," Julian said without further ado, taking a thin leather wallet from his inside jacket pocket and extracting perfectly folded papers. "My documents, my ID. The witnesses are the same as those listed originally. Any objections?" The registrar took the papers with trembling fingers and began examining them with his characteristic meticulousness. I took the opportunity to pull Julian closer and hiss through clenched teeth. "You carry a birth certificate with you to your wedding? Who does that anyway?" "Someone who's prepared for any eventuality," he replied, not looking at me, maintaining a mask of impeccable calm. "This is crazy. We can't really get married. You're my boss. This is crazy." "This is the only common sense I have today," he retorted, finally turning his head towards me. "Or do you want your father to end up in prison after killing Ryan when he finds him? Trust me, he'll be looking. And knowing Mr. Davis's character, it won't end well." I glanced at my father. He was still clenching his fists, his face contorted in rage, muttering threats while jabbing his finger at his phone. Julian was right. My father was capable of jumping on a plane to Vegas, finding Ryan, and committing a stupid act he'd regret for the rest of his life. "The paperwork is in order," the receptionist announced, though his voice still held a hint of uncertainty. "But I must warn you, this is a legally binding document. Once you sign it, you will be legally married according to state law. Are you sure you want to proceed?" Julian looked at me. I felt the full weight of that gaze, the silent question in it. I could still refuse. I could still say, "No, accept all this shame. Let everyone disperse with their pathetic gossip." Or take this step into absolute, unthinkable madness, which made no sense, yet somehow seemed the only way out. "We're sure," I exhaled before reason could take over. The registrar nodded slowly. "Okay, then let's begin." He turned to the guests, cleared his throat, and spoke in a professional, emotionless tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to begin the civil marriage ceremony between Miss Sophia Davis and Mr. Julian Croft. I request silence and respect for the occasion." The whispers didn't die down completely, but they were muted to a tolerable hum. Phones were still at the ready. A look of mute disbelief was on everyone's faces, but at least no one else was shouting. Julian led me firmly to the altar. His palm rested on my back, a protective, possessive gesture that sent shivers down my spine. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly as we stood before the registrar. "No," I breathed out honestly. "Nothing about this is okay." "I know, but let's pretend it's supposed to be this way." The registrar began reading the standard verses, monotonously droning lines from the state code. I barely heard the words. My mind raced, trying to comprehend how I'd gone from waiting for Ryan to marrying Julian Croft, my boss, the man with whom I'd never had a single, truly personal conversation in 3 years of working together. Julian Croft, do you take Sophia Davis to be your lawful wedded wife?" "Yes," he answered without the slightest pause, looking me straight in the eye. My heart stopped for a moment. This was really happening. "Sophia Davis, do you take Julian Croft to be your lawful wedded wife?" I opened my mouth. The words caught in my throat. Everyone froze in anticipation. Julian's gaze was fixed, and that gaze was inescapable. My father frowned. My mother pressed a handkerchief to her mouth. Chloe bit her nails. The room held its breath. "Yes," I finally whispered, and the words sounded like a death sentence. "By the power vested in me by the state of New York, I now pronounce you husband and wife," the registrar announced. "You may kiss the bride." Panic, sharp and cold, gripped my throat. We hadn't agreed on this. We hadn't agreed on anything, but certainly not on a kiss. Julian must have read the horror in my eyes. He leaned in just a little. His lips barely brushed mine, so quickly and chastely that it could hardly be called a kiss. But it was enough. The room erupted in applause, whistles, shouts, and another flash of hundreds of cameras. "It's done," his whisper touched my ear. "Now smile and breathe. The worst is over." But when we turned to face the guests, our hands were intertwined, and our faces wore strained, lifeless smiles. And I thought of only one thing. The worst was just beginning. The applause rumbled like distant thunder as I tried to comprehend the surreal nature of what had just happened. Married. I married Julian Croft, my boss, the man I'd known only as my stern, untouchable boss 3 hours ago. His hand still held mine tightly, anchoring me to this new, unbelievable reality. "Congratulations, dear," Mom approached, still unsteady, wiping away her smudged mascara with a crumpled handkerchief. "Welcome to the family. We had no idea that you. Julian bowed his head politely, releasing my hand just long enough to give my mother a brief, almost formal hug. "My deepest apologies for the confusion, Mrs. Davis. Everything happened so quickly between us. We didn't mean to mislead anyone." "Mislead?" Her father appeared behind her, his face still red, but the rage within him now warring with utter bewilderment. "Young man, you owe me an explanation. My daughter was engaged to someone else just 10 minutes ago, and now it turns out—" "Dad, please," I interjected, feeling a lump of panic rising in my throat. "Not now. There are 200 people here. We can talk later." He looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. And perhaps it was true. The Sophia he knew would never have done anything like this. Never made a decision so impulsive, irrational, so completely unlike herself. But that Sophia wasn't publicly abandoned at the altar in front of her entire world. "Your father is right to demand an explanation," Julian interjected calmly, "and he will get one. But, as Sophia rightly pointed out, right now our responsibility is to attend to our guests. They've spent time and effort to be here with us. It would be the height of impoliteness not to thank them." Julian's icy, incontrovertible logic disarmed any objections. My father merely clenched his jaw, nodded sharply, and walked away, muttering something under his breath. My mother looked at us with tear-stained, questioning eyes and followed him. I finally exhaled the air I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "Breathe," Julian said quietly, not looking at me, maintaining a flawless, social smile for the approaching guests. "Hold on, a few more hours, and it'll all be over." "And then what?" I hissed through my teeth, forcing a smile for Aunt Carol, who passed by with an appraising, piercing gaze. "We'll figure it out later. Right now, I need you to act like this is the day you've been dreaming about." Chloe flew up to us, her heels clicking desperately on the marble. "Sophie, what the hell just happened? You married your boss? Are you completely nuts?" "Maybe," I breathed out, feeling hysteria rising in my chest. "But it happened, Chloe. I signed the papers. I said yes. It's a legal fact." "You must be Chloe," Julian interjected, extending his free hand. "I've heard so much about you. Sophia keeps mentioning you." Chloe shook his hand distrustfully, studying him with her eyes as if he were a complex blueprint. "Strange, but Sophia never mentioned the two of you." We preferred to keep our relationship a secret, he retorted calmly. Considering professional ethics, it seemed the most sensible thing to do. Sensible? Getting married suddenly in the midst of public disgrace, is that your idea of reasonable? Chloe, please, I pleaded. Not now. My friend looked at me with a mixture of alarm and disappointment, but finally sighed. Okay, but you and I are going to have a very long and detailed conversation. Understand? I was immensely grateful that she at least didn't cause another scene. The wedding coordinator approached with a tablet, no longer looking deathly pale as he had half an hour ago. Mr. and Mrs. Croft, shall we begin the reception? Everything is ready. The orchestra is waiting for the signal, and the guests are already asking when the toasts will be. Julian glanced at his watch, a Patek Philippe, which probably cost more than my apartment. Proceed as planned. Excellent. Then, if you would show us into the main hall. The next half hour passed in a blur. It was nothing but smiling faces, forced congratulations, and piercing, curious glances. I shook countless hands, accepted hugs from distant relatives whose names I couldn't remember, and smiled until my cheekbones ached. Julian moved beside me with astonishing ease, answering questions with a flourish and an evasiveness, masterfully deflecting dangerous topics into neutral territory. Your husband is quite the man, my cousin whispered in my ear. And he's wealthy, too, it's obvious. Just look at that suit, those shoes. That watch, I'm sure, costs as much as my mortgage. Yes, I answered automatically because I didn't know what else to say. And how did you meet? Just yesterday you were talking about Ryan, and now it's all so confusing. Sorry, I think Mom's calling, I lied and retreated, not giving her time to ask more questions. I found temporary refuge under one of the columns, entwined with white orchids, trying to catch my breath. The corset still squeezed my ribs. The veil on my head felt like lead. My shoes cut my feet, and worst of all, this constant, nauseating feeling that I was performing in a play whose lines I didn't know. Are you okay? Julian's voice made me flinch. I hadn't heard him approach. He handed me a glass of champagne, which I accepted with trembling fingers. No, I gave in, taking a long, scalding gulp. I'm not okay. Nothing about this is okay. I know, but you're doing much better than you think. Better? Julian, I just married you. I don't even know your favorite color. I don't know if you have any brothers or sisters. I don't know where you live. I know absolutely nothing about you, except that you're an architectural genius and can't stand decaf. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. Dark blue. I have a sister. She lives in Barcelona. My penthouse is in Soho. And I'm absolutely right about decaf. It's a crime against the very nature of coffee. Despite the horror of what was happening, I felt a wild, hysterical laugh well up inside me. This is madness, complete and utter. I agree, he nodded, but it's madness we can work with. Look, I understand this is a shock. You don't know me, but I promise we'll figure this out. We just need to get through today. Let people disperse peacefully, and tomorrow we'll sit down and calmly discuss what to do next. What next? I asked, looking him straight in the eye. A quick divorce? A pretend marriage for a while? What exactly were you planning when you started this? Julian looked at me for a few moments. It seemed like an eternity. There was something in his gaze I couldn't decipher, something deeper than simple pity or a sense of duty. Whatever it takes, he finally said. I did this for you, Sophia, not out of duty, not out of pity, because... A bride and groom for a toast, the coordinator announced pompously, interrupting him at the most interesting point. I wanted to shout for everyone to shut up and let him finish, but we were already being led to the center of the room, to the crystal glasses on the high table. The orchestra began to play something languidly romantic. The guests closed in on us. The forest of phones rose into the air again. Julian picked up his glass and raised it, first scanning the crowd, then turning to me. I want to thank everyone for being here. I know the circumstances have unfolded unusually, but life rarely follows our plans. Sometimes it surprises. Sometimes it gives us exactly what we need at the most unexpected moment. He paused, and his gaze connected with mine with such intensity that it took my breath away. Sophia, from the very day you joined the firm, I knew you were special. Your dedication, your intelligence, your ability to see solutions where others see only problems. But most importantly, your kindness. The way you treat people, no matter their situation. You can't teach that. It's just in you. My throat tightened treacherously, and tears welled up in my eyes. These weren't empty, memorized words. He spoke with genuine conviction. I don't know what the future holds for us, he continued. No one does. But I know I want to spend it with you. So I drink to us, to the unexpected, to the imperfect, and to the courage to step into the void when the ground shifts beneath our feet. Applause, shouts, and then someone's drunken cry, "Kiss her! Kiss her!" The whole room took up the chant, and soon everyone was chanting. Julian raised an eyebrow slightly, asking me wordlessly. I nodded, bracing myself for the same fleeting, meaningless touch as at the altar. But this time, everything was different. When his lips touched mine, it wasn't quick or chaste. It was deliberate, slow, all-consuming. His hand slid to my waist, pulling me closer. The palm of his other hand rested on my cheek with a tenderness that belied the intensity of the kiss itself. I felt the world blur at the edges. The noise became a distant hum. Every nerve ending in my body, numb for months, suddenly flared and came to life. When we finally parted our lips, we were both breathless. The guests were wild, whistling and applauding, but to me it was like they were being pierced through water. I could only stare at Julian. Something burned in his dark eyes that was definitely not acting. "What was that?" I breathed, still stunned. "A convincing performance," he replied, but there was a hint of nervousness in his voice. "It wasn't a performance." "No," he admitted after a moment's pause. "It wasn't." Before I could even process this, the orchestra began the first dance. Julian led me onto the empty dance floor, his hand firmly and confidently resting on my back. The guests parted, forming a circle, and we twirled to a slow rhythm. "Can you dance?" I asked, acutely aware of every inch where our bodies touched. "A required course at university," he replied. "Architecture and ballroom dancing. A strange mix, I know." Strange, but surprisingly useful for situations like this. For situations like spontaneously marrying your coworker? Exactly. It should be included in the curriculum as an elective. I laughed, resoundingly and unexpectedly, even to myself. "You have a sense of humor. I didn't know that." "Sophia, there are a lot of things you don't know about me," he said quietly, gracefully guiding me around the bend. "But you'll have time to find out." "How long exactly?" I whispered. "Because this can't last forever. Sooner or later, someone will figure out that—" "Shh," he interrupted softly, pulling me a little closer. "Don't think about it now. Just dance with me. At least for the duration of this one song, forget about everything else." And I obeyed. I closed my eyes, let my head rest on his shoulder, and lost myself in the music. I allowed myself to forget that I'd been expecting someone else this morning. Forget that this marriage was a farce born of despair. Forget that tomorrow would come the reckoning for this crazy decision. For the duration of this one song, for these 3 minutes and 40 seconds, I allowed myself to believe that all of this was true. Night had long since fallen over New York when the last guest left. I stood by the enormous window of the Ritz banquet hall and watched the car lights fade into the darkness. The moment I'd been dreading for the past 6 hours had arrived. No more pretending. No more forcing a smile or making idle conversation. Only Julian and I remained, and the impossible reality in which we didn't know what to do with each other. "Do you want me to call your parents?" His voice broke the silence behind me. "Your father left upset, to put it mildly. Maybe we should clear things up today." I shook my head without turning around. "No, not today. I don't have the strength for any explanations." The footsteps came closer, and soon I saw his reflection in the dark glass. He was standing a meter away. He took off his jacket and loosened his tie. He rolled up the sleeves of his snow-white shirt, revealing tanned forearms that were surprisingly strong for an architect. I looked away from the glass, feeling a stupid, treacherous heat spreading down my neck. "I booked the honeymoon suite," Julian said. "The coordinator insisted. Apparently, it's part of the package your father paid for." "The honeymoon suite," I snorted. Of course, what else could I possibly need from this circus? Sharing a romantic suite with a man who's technically my husband, but a complete stranger. "I could get a separate room," he quickly suggested, as if sensing my panic. "That's probably even better. I don't want you to feel awkward." "No," I interrupted, my own answer surprising me. "We've already put on enough of a show for today. If any of the staff sees us sleeping apart on our wedding night, the whole hotel will be talking about it by breakfast." Julian nodded slowly. "So, we'll share a suite. I'll sleep on the couch." "Julian, you're 6'9". You won't fit on any couch." "I've slept in far worse conditions on construction sites. I'll be fine." The tension between us grew taut. I finally turned to face him, crossing my arms over my chest. That stupid dress suddenly seemed like a ridiculous carnival costume for a performance that never happened. "Why did you do that?" I asked, desperate to hear that interrupted answer. "And don't tell me it was out of pity or a sense of duty. No one marries for those reasons." He looked at me for a long moment, his dark eyes searching my face, searching for the right words. Finally, he sighed and ran a hand through his hair, disturbing its perfect style for the first time all day. "Because I couldn't just watch them tear you apart," he said, with stunning simplicity. I heard the whispers, the giggles, that vile curiosity. "I saw your face when you left that room. I saw you trying to hold on while your world was crumbling, and I couldn't take it." "But that doesn't explain the marriage. You could have done 1,000 other things. Take me out, call it off, help me just run away. You didn't have to marry me." "You're right," he agreed. "Not necessarily. But at that moment, it seemed like the only solution, the one that solved all the problems at once. Your father was itching to do something stupid. Your family would have ruminated on the shame for months. The guests would have taken with them a story that would haunt you for years. And you would have blamed yourself, even though you were innocent." The tears I'd been holding back all that endless day finally came pouring out. I tried to brush them away, but Julian was already there. He handed me a snow-white cloth handkerchief from his pocket. "Don't cry," he whispered with such gentleness that it hurt even more. "You've shed enough tears over someone who wasn't worth it." "So what now?" My voice wavered. "What are we going to do about this marriage? Divorce in a week? Pretend for a while? Continue working together, pretending nothing happened?" "Honestly, I don't know," he admitted. "I didn't have a plan beyond today. I just knew I had to help you this way. It's noble, but marriages aren't built on nobility. They're built on love." "Love," he repeated, and there was something in his tone that made me perk up. "Yes, love. And we don't love each other. We barely know each other." Julian took one last step, closing the distance between us to just a few centimeters. I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. I felt his every breath, heard every beat of my heart. "Do you want to know a secret?" His whisper was barely audible. "That kiss on the dance floor? It wasn't a game. And I think you felt it too." I opened my mouth to deny it. I was ready to blurt out that it was all nonsense. But the words stuck in my throat, because he was right. I felt it. That moment when the rest of the world dissolved and only the two of us remained, dancing to the music, connected by something that defied all logic. "It doesn't mean anything," I finally managed to say. "It was just adrenaline, the heat of the moment." "It was chemistry," Julian corrected, and the slight, almost invisible smile on his lips made my stomach lurch. "Because that's what it is, Sophia. Chemistry. You can't fake it. You can't create it out of thin air. It's either there or it's not." "Are you crazy?" I whispered, taking a step back as if from a fire. "This is complete madness. 12 hours ago, you were just my boss. Now you're my husband, and you're talking about some kind of chemistry and... "You're scared," he interrupted calmly. "I understand. I'm scared too. But that doesn't change the fact that there's something between us, something worth exploring." "Explore?" I snorted, almost hysterically. Julian, we're not teenagers on first dates. We're adults who committed an impulsive act and now have to deal with the consequences. You're right, he agreed. We're adults. So let's act like adults. Let's talk honestly about what we really want. And what do you want? The question hung in the air between us, heavy and explosive. Julian looked at me with that intensity that was impossible to turn away from. His gaze seemed to see deeper than all the protective walls I'd built around myself all day long. I want to give you time, he finally said. Time to get over what Ryan did. Time to get to know me outside the office. Time to decide what you want to do with this marriage without any pressure. In the meantime, we're just living our normal lives. I won't demand anything from you. I won't push you into something you're not ready for. But I won't pretend I don't feel what I feel. My heart began to pound dangerously and loudly somewhere in my temples. What do you feel? He took another step closer. Now he was so close that I could feel the warmth of his body. I could smell the subtle, woody scent of his cologne, mingled with something of my own, something distinctly masculine. I feel like that kiss on the dance floor was the most real thing that's happened to me in years, he whispered. I feel like seeing you at the office in the morning brightens my day. I feel like I want to hear your real laugh, the one you let out when you think no one's listening, every day. And I feel like what I did today wasn't just to save you from shame. It was also because the thought of another man hurting you was unbearable to me. The silence that followed was deafening. All I could hear was my own ragged breathing. Every word he said sank deep into that most protected place in my chest, the one I'd kept bottled up for the past few months with Ryan. I can't process this right now, I finally exhaled. It's too much. All of this is too much. I know, Julian said, stepping back to give me space. So I suggest we just take a break today, and tomorrow, with a clear head, we can start figuring everything out. I nodded, infinitely grateful for this temporary reprieve. Julian walked to the door where the coordinator had left our suitcases. He picked up my bag and placed it next to the bathroom door. Take a shower, change, make yourself comfortable. I'll wait here. Julian, I stopped him as his hand was already on the handle. Thank you for today, for saving me. He turned around, and the smile he gave me was genuine, warm, completely unlike the professional expressions I'd seen in the office for the past 3 years. I didn't save you, Sophia. I simply reminded you that you're strong enough to save yourself. When the door closed behind him, I sank onto the edge of the enormous bed strewn with rose petals. I picked one up, feeling its silky, fragile texture. This entire suite had been decorated for the romantic night I was supposed to spend with Ryan. Scented candles, champagne in a silver bucket, heart-shaped chocolates on the pillows. But Ryan was now in Vegas, probably drunk, celebrating his great escape. And here I was, married to the man who had just confessed his feelings for me, the man who knew me far better than I thought, the man who had risked everything to protect me from the greatest humiliation of my life. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My makeup was smudged, my hair was ruined, my dress was rumpled. I looked exactly how I felt, broken and put back together at the same time, like something that had been broken and then mended with another, stronger, more reliable material. I slowly unzipped my wedding dress and let it slide to the floor in a shapeless heap of lace and satin. I stared at it for a few seconds before kicking it into the corner. Tomorrow I would have explanations, consequences, decisions to make. Tomorrow I would talk to my family, discuss our next steps with Julian, try to understand what it all meant. But today I just wanted to close my eyes and, if only for a few hours, pretend that this world made any sense. The hot water from the shower hit my back with an almost painful force. Exactly what I needed. I let the steam fill the entire marble bathroom, trying to process the last 12 hours of my life. Just 12 hours. That's how long it took for my world to turn upside down. I closed my eyes, rested my palms on the cool tile, and let the events of the day wash over me unfiltered. Ryan dumping me, the angry whispers of the guests, Julian appearing like a vision, the kiss at the altar, the toast, the dance, and that conversation here in the suite. Those words that ignited something in me I didn't even have a name for. I feel like that kiss was the most real thing that's happened to me in years. His words echoed in my head. How could a man I barely knew say exactly what I needed to hear? And why did my body react so stupidly and treacherously every time he approached? He was my boss, for heaven's sake, my handsome, smart, incredibly successful boss, who, as it turned out, had been watching me for 3 years without me even noticing. I turned off the water and stepped out, wrapped in a huge, fluffy towel. I peered into my suitcase, silently thanking Chloe for packing something other than the stupid, sexy lingerie I'd bought for my honeymoon. I found some plain cotton pajamas, unremarkable, perfect for the awkward situation we found ourselves in. When I emerged from the bathroom, Julian was standing by the picture window, looking out at the city lights at night. He'd changed into a simple gray t-shirt and soft sweatpants. Without his impeccable suit, he looked younger, simpler, less like a millionaire architect and more like just a man caught in an impossible situation. "Feeling better?" he asked, without turning around, as if he'd sensed my presence. "Cleaner, at least," I replied, running a hand through my damp hair. I'm not sure better is the right word right now. He finally turned around, and I noticed the weariness in the corners of his eyes. This day had worn us both out. He gestured to the table, where a service had appeared while I'd showered. 2 plates of pasta, a salad, bread, and a bottle of red wine. "I thought you might be hungry. You barely ate anything at the banquet." My stomach growled traitorously in response. He was right. I'd been so preoccupied with the performance and the smiles that I hadn't eaten a bite since breakfast, which now seemed like another life. "Thank you," I muttered, sinking into a chair at the table. "You didn't have to." "Of course you do," Julian said, sitting down opposite me and pouring wine into 2 glasses. "You need to eat, and it's easier for me to digest all this on a full stomach." We ate in silence for the first few minutes. The silence was surprisingly not awkward. It was almost comfortable, as if we'd both lived through the same battle and earned the right to simply be there without filling every second with empty words. "What will you tell your family tomorrow?" Julian finally asked, putting down his fork. "Your father seems to be expecting a full-blown explanation." I sighed and took a long sip of wine, red, velvety, warming me from the inside. The truth, I guess, well, at least some version of it, that Ryan left me, that you helped, that things had gotten really complicated, and work. This question had been gnawing at me from the very second I signed the marriage license. And how are we going to handle this? We can't just pretend nothing happened. The whole office will know. "They probably already know," Julian corrected me. "Social media moves faster than light. By the morning meeting, everyone will have at least 3 different versions of what happened." I almost threw up. I hadn't thought about it. My colleagues, my clients, my partners, everyone will know I married my boss the same day my fiancé dumped me. The gossip will be relentless, cruel. "Hey," his voice pulled me out of this spiral of panic. "Look at me." I obeyed. I met those dark eyes, which were now studying me with genuine concern. "We'll get through this together," he said firmly. "If anyone has anything to say, let them say it to my face. And if anyone dares to disrespect you, they'll deal with me. Understand?" The defensive, almost angry note in his voice ignited something warm and bright in my chest. Ryan had never defended me like that. He'd never stood up for me. It's always been me, the one who smooths things over, apologizes for things that aren't my fault, makes everything work. "Why?" I asked quietly. "Why do you care so much?" Julian put down his glass and leaned forward, closing the distance between us. "Because for 3 years, I watched you give everything you've got at this firm. Watched you show up early, leave late, solve problems that weren't even yours. Watched you smile even when I knew you were at your wit's end. And I saw you with Ryan." I blinked, stunned. "What?" On the rare occasions he picked you up at the office, I saw him talk to you, like you were his personal assistant, not his partner, as if your victories weren't worth half his. And I saw you literally shrink in size when he was around, as if you needed to take up less space so that it could shine more freely. His words hit home because they were the pure truth, every single word. And the fact that Julian noticed it when I was just beginning to realize it myself was devastating. I loved him, I breathed, though even to my own ears it rang hollow. Did you love him, or did you love the idea of who you were supposed to become with him? Julian asked softly. Because from the outside, Sophia, it didn't look like love. It looked like habit, like a fear of loneliness, like settling for less than you deserve simply because it's easier than admitting you're with the wrong person. Tears welled up in my eyes again, but this time they weren't tears of humiliation or grief. They were tears of recognition. Finally, what my subconscious had been screaming at me for months was being said out loud. He made me feel small, I admitted, the words coming out in a broken whisper, smaller and smaller, and I let him, because I was afraid that if I demanded more, I'd be left with nothing. Julian rose from his chair and dropped to one knee in front of me, taking my hands in his. The gesture was so unexpected, so tender, that I couldn't tear my gaze away from his eyes, where I saw something precious, something worth protecting. Listen to me very carefully, Sophia Davis, he said with such intensity that it took my breath away. You are not small. You are brilliant, talented, and capable of things most people can't even dream of. And any man who doesn't see that, who doesn't thank fate for it every damn day, isn't worth a second of your time. He paused, his thumbs gently rubbing my knuckles. I know it's hard. Your life just exploded, and the last thing you need right now is more pressure. But I need you to know, when I look at you, I don't see an executive assistant. I don't see an employee. I see an incredible woman who's worth loving exactly as she is, without having to make herself smaller so someone else can feel bigger. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. All those protective walls I'd built up all evening cracked. Something vulnerable and scary lay beneath them. I don't know how to do this, I admitted. I don't know how to be your wife. I don't know how to let you in. I'm scared. What? He prompted when I faltered. That it's all too good to be true. That I'll wake up tomorrow and realize you were just being kind because you felt sorry for me. That when you truly know me, all my flaws and quirks, you'll understand. I wasn't worth the risk you took. Julian released one of my hands and touched my cheek with his palm, brushing away an unbidden tear with his thumb. Do you want to know what I see when I look at you? I see someone who gives 100%, even when no one's watching. I see someone who treats a cleaning lady with the same respect as a billionaire client. I see someone who stayed up until 2 a.m. to help a colleague with a project that wasn't even part of her job description. I see strength that masquerades as kindness, intelligence that masquerades as modesty. And yes, I see your fears and flaws. You're human. But that doesn't make you any less amazing. It makes you real. I don't know who moved first. Maybe we both did, simultaneously, drawn together by a force that has no name. All I know is that suddenly his lips touched mine again. And this kiss was unlike the previous ones. It wasn't for show. It wasn't a game. There was hunger in it, need, and something far more dangerous. His hands tangled in my damp hair, pulling me closer. I responded with equal fury, allowing all the pain and confusion of this day to coalesce into this, a physical connection that meant more than words. We stumbled awkwardly toward the bed, tripping over the coffee table. We laughed into each other's mouths, nearly collapsing. Julian gently laid me down on the mattress, bracing himself with his arms on either side of my head. His eyes searched mine for an answer, giving me one last chance to retreat. Are you sure? His voice was hoarse. We can stop. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. I looked at him, at this man who had come out of nowhere and changed everything, at this man who saw me, really saw me, in a way no one else had. And I made my decision. I'm sure, I whispered, pulling him close. For the first time in a long time, I'm completely sure of something. And when our bodies met, when every touch ignited nerve endings I'd forgotten about, when whispers turned to moans and caresses became desperate, I realized we'd crossed a line from which there was no return. This was no longer a farce, not a game. This was real, tangible, all-consuming. And for the first time since that morning when I woke up as Ryan's fiancée, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Morning light was timidly filtering through the cracks in the curtains of the luxurious suite when I awoke. I was wrapped in sheets that smelled of him, his skin, his warmth, something I hadn't felt next to me in years. Julian slept beside me, one of his arms around my waist, a protective, almost possessive gesture. His face seemed younger in its calm, the wrinkles of tension smoothed out, his lips slightly parted. I allowed myself to simply look at him, realizing the incredible scale of what had happened between us. Just 24 hours ago, I was preparing to marry Ryan, fervently believing I was making the only right choice. And now I lay here, naked under the sheets, with a man who was practically a stranger, yet who knew me more deeply than anyone else. Julian's phone vibrated on the nightstand, rudely breaking into the morning silence. He stirred, pulling me closer to him, and only then opened his eyes. Seeing that I was awake, a slow, devastating smile spread across his lips. "Good morning," he whispered, his voice hoarse with sleep. "Good morning," I replied, feeling my cheeks heat up as the perfectly clear memories of the previous night unfolded. He reached for his phone and frowned at the screen. 32 messages, 15 missed. This will be fun. From whom? Mostly from your family, a few from the office, and apparently my sister in Barcelona already knows and demands an immediate briefing. I groaned and buried my face in the pillow. I don't want to deal with this now. Maybe we should just stay here forever and pretend the outside world doesn't exist? Julian laughed, low, deep, and the sound echoed pleasantly somewhere in my chest. Gladly, but sooner or later, reality will catch up with us, or at least we'll have to answer a few messages before your dad starts kicking down the door. As if on cue, my phone rang. The name Mom flashed across the screen. I looked at Julianne in silent panic. "Answer me," he said softly but firmly. "The longer you wait, the worse it will be." I took a deep breath and accepted the call. "Mom? Sophia Davis, where are you? Are you okay? Your father and I were up all night trying to figure out what the hell happened yesterday. How did you end up married to your boss?" "Mom, calm down. I'm fine. I'm at the hotel with Julian." There was a deafening silence on the other end of the line. Then her voice rang out with icy, measured clarity. "With Julian, in the suite. Together? We're husband and wife, Mom. Technically, this is where we're supposed to be." "Don't give me technically, young lady. Yesterday you married Ryan. Today you wake up with someone else? How am I supposed to digest that?" I felt Julianne's hand rest on my hip. Silent support, a firm reminder that I wasn't alone. That simple touch gave me courage. "Ryan left me, Mom. He fled the country, knowing full well I'd be waiting for him at the altar. Julian helped me when I was at my lowest. And yes, I know it all happened very quickly, but it was my choice. No one forced me." "So what next? Will you continue this act, or will you get a divorce, like any sane person would after an impulsive marriage?" The question hung in the air. I looked at Julian for a clue, but in his dark eyes I saw only the same question reflected back. So what next? "I don't know, Mom," I admitted honestly. "We're still trying to figure this out ourselves. But I promise, this isn't an act." And it wasn't a frivolous decision. Mom sighed heavily. "Your father wants to talk to you. And to Julian, today. He says if this man is your husband now, we should get to know him better than the savior at a wedding crash." "Okay, I'll tell him. Where and when?" "At home, at noon. And Sophia," her voice softened, "I just want to be sure you're okay, that this is what you really want." I looked at Julian again, at this man who had burst into my life like a hurricane and turned everything upside down. At this man who saw me falling apart and instead of retreating, chose to support me. At this man who made me feel more in one night than Ryan had in 2 years. "I'm okay, Mom," I said, and there was a confidence in my voice that surprised even me. Better than I've been in a long, long time. When I hung up, Julian was already sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through his messages with a concentrated look. I took a moment to simply look at him. The morning light slid across the line of his back, highlighting the definition of muscles that clearly weren't built from sitting in a chair. "What?" he asked without turning around, but I heard the smile in his voice. "Nothing. I'm just wondering how I couldn't tell my boss was in such excellent physical shape." "Excellent shape?" He turned around with a raised eyebrow. "Is that all I get after last night?" I laughed and threw a pillow at him, which he caught with ease. "You're unbearable." "And you're beautiful," he replied, with such simplicity that it took my breath away for a moment, especially now. With disheveled hair and that smile you try to hide, the moment felt intimate again, filled with the same chemistry that had exploded between us last night. He put his phone down and moved closer, capturing my lips in a slow, deep kiss that promised something more. "We need to go to my parents," I whispered against his lips when we finally broke apart. "They'll have a million questions." "I know. I'm ready. Your father will probably try to intimidate me." "He won't be the first." I pulled back to look him straight in the eye. "Julian, I'm serious. They'll want to know everything. Who are we to each other? What are we going to do? Is this permanent or temporary? And I don't know what to tell them." He took my face in his hands, forcing me to stare. "Then we'll answer together, with the truth." "And what's the truth?" "The truth is, it all started as an impulse to save you from a nightmare. But somewhere overnight, it stopped being a game and became something real, something I want to explore, something I believe is worth trying." "What if it doesn't work?" I asked quietly. "What if in a month we realize it was just adrenaline? What if we destroy everything we had chasing a mirage?" "What if it does work?" he countered. "What if this is exactly what we both need and we were too blind or too cowardly to see it? What if missing this chance out of fear, that would be the biggest mistake?" I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of this decision weighing on me. I could run away right now, ask Julian to annul the marriage, pretend it never happened, return to our safe, predictable life as boss and subordinate. It would have been the sensible thing to do, the one my rational, terrified mind insisted on. But my heart, that treacherous organ silent for so long, finally woke up. And it whispered something completely different. "I want to try," I whispered, opening my eyes and meeting his intense gaze. "I want to see where this leads. But I ask you one thing. Be honest with me. If you change your mind, if you regret it, just tell me. I can't survive a second betrayal." The pain that flashed across Julian's face was so vivid and real that it hurt. "Sophia, look at me. Really look at me. I'm not Ryan. I won't disappear when the going gets tough. I won't make you shrink to make myself seem bigger. And I certainly won't abandon you, afraid of my own feelings." "And what do you feel?" Julian smiled. That same, slow, devastating smile that always makes my pulse skip a beat. "I'm still figuring it out, but I know that when I see you, something in my chest tightens. I know that your laughter is my favorite sound. I know that the thought of seeing you every day makes me want to wake up in the morning. And I know that last night was just the beginning of something so much greater." Tears pricked my eyelids again, but this time they were tears of relief, of hope. Finally, the feeling of being chosen without any strings attached. "I need a shower," I announced, trying to lighten the mood before I burst into tears. "And coffee. Lots of coffee." "Would you like some company in the shower?" He winked mischievously. "Absolutely not. If you go there with me, we'll never get out of this suite, and my parents will end up sending SWAT after us." Julian laughed, kissing me again before letting go. "Okay, I'll order breakfast. What do you like?" "Surprise me." While I was hiding in the bathroom, Julian picked up his phone to sort through the messages from his sister Elena. Each one was more insistent than the last. He selected video calling, bracing himself for the inevitable interrogation. Elena's face appeared on the screen, a mixture of unbridled curiosity and mild irritation. Julian Croft, you got married and didn't even say a word to your own sister. Good morning to you too, Elena. Not good morning to me. Explain, now. I saw the photos on Instagram. Who is she? And why do people in the comments write that it was a surprise wedding because the real groom didn't show up? Julian sighed and ran a hand through his hair. It's a little more complicated than that. I have plenty of time, and the story better be good because Mom's already in a panic. She's booked tickets for tomorrow. Of course she has, he muttered. The short version? Sophia works for me. Her fiancé dumped her at the altar. I intervened. We got married, and it turns out there's something real between us, something worth it. Elena looked at him for a few seconds, then burst out laughing. God, only you could have pulled this off, brother. Only you. I didn't plan it, that's obvious. But tell me honestly, was this all just a chivalrous gesture, or is there really something there? Julian thought about the previous night, about every kiss, every touch, every whisper in the dark, about what it was like to wake up with Sophia in his arms, as if some piece of the world that had been out of place for years had finally fallen into place. There's something there, he admitted, something very big. Elena's smile softened, turning warm. Then hold on to it. Don't let other people's opinions dictate your rules. If she's special, if it's true, don't let her go. I'm not going to. Great, now invite her. I want to meet my new daughter-in-law before Mom arrives and scares her away with her overprotectiveness. Julian laughed. She's in the shower, but I promise you'll meet her soon. And Elena, thank you. For what? For not judging, for believing. Always, brother, always. My parents' house in Westchester looked exactly the same as always, cozy, full of greenery, with the smell of freshly brewed coffee that was the soundtrack of my childhood. But when Julian parked his Mercedes in the driveway, I felt like we were landing on a battlefield. Ready? He asked, turning off the engine and looking at me. No, I admitted honestly, but I guess that doesn't matter anymore. Julian took my hand and intertwined our fingers with the easy, familiar ease of a gesture. The simple gesture still made me tremble. Remember, we're a team. No matter what happens, we'll face it together. These words gave me one last dose of courage. We got out of the car and walked to the front door, where my mother was already waiting, her expression unreadable. Seeing our intertwined hands, something in her gaze softened, but only for a split second. Come in, she said simply, stepping aside. My father sat in the living room, arms crossed, with that same menacing, familiar scowl. To my surprise, Chloe was there too. She sat in a chair and gave me a reassuring, if nervous, smile. Sit, my father commanded, gesturing to the sofa across from him. Julian waited until I was seated before taking the seat next to him, still holding my hand. The gesture didn't escape my father, his gaze fixed on our intertwined fingers with an almost physical intensity. Well, he began, his voice thundering, does anyone care to explain to me what the hell happened yesterday? Because from my perspective, my daughter was going to marry someone. That person vanished. And then you show up, he jerked his finger toward Julian, and end up marrying her. Explain the meaning of that? Julian leaned forward, still holding my hand. You're absolutely right, Mr. Davis. From the outside, it looks ridiculous, impulsive, irresponsible. But if you'll allow me, I'll explain why I made this decision. My father waved his hand in annoyance. I'm listening. I worked with Sophia for 3 years, Julian began. During that time, I watched her grow into one of the finest professionals I've ever known. But more importantly, I saw who she is as a person. Her loyalty, her integrity, the respect with which she treats everyone without exception. I also saw her with Ryan, on the rare occasions he stopped by the office. Ryan's name made my father clench his jaw so tightly he could hear it grinding. And every time I saw them together, Julianne continued, I couldn't understand why such an incredible woman would settle for someone who clearly didn't appreciate her. Someone who treated her like an accessory, not an equal. Someone who made her cower so he could seem more important. Tears stung my eyelids as I heard those words spoken aloud in front of my family. Such a piercing, uncomfortable truth. Yesterday, when I saw what was happening, heard those whispers, saw the humiliation on her face, I had two choices. Julianne looked directly at my father, his gaze unwavering. I could stand by, let it all happen, and watch your daughter be publicly trampled, or I could do something. And marriage was the only option? Mom interjected from her seat by the window. Her voice trembled. At that moment, yes, Julianne admitted honestly. It seemed like the only solution, the one that would solve all my problems at once. But I didn't just do it for her. I also did it because for months, maybe years, I'd been wanting to tell her how I felt, and I'd never had the courage. Last night's nightmare gave me the perfect, albeit completely insane, chance to show it. The silence that followed his words was so thick I could hear the ticking of the old kitchen clock. My father looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. My mother pressed her palms to her chest. Chloe was smiling broadly, tears streaming down her cheeks. Dad, I finally spoke, my voice trembling but firm. I know this is hard to accept. Believe me, I haven't figured it all out yet. But you need to know one thing. What happened yesterday wasn't a farce. It wasn't charity. It was the first time in years that someone saw me, all of me, with all my flaws and fears, and decided I was worth fighting for. My father closed his eyes and took a deep, forced breath. When he opened them again, there was something new in them, something softer. Ryan called me this morning, he said, and the air in the room seemed to freeze. From Vegas, drunk, crying, insisting he'd made a mistake, was scared, wanted to go back and fix everything. I felt Julianne instinctively squeeze my hand, but I didn't take my eyes off my father. And what did you tell him? A slow, almost predatory smile touched Gerard Davis's lips. I told him it was too late, that my daughter was now married to the man who had the courage to show up after he ran away. And if he ever dares approach you again, I will personally ensure his deepest regret. I let out something between a chuckle and a sob. Julian laughed too, and I saw a ton of tension lift from his shoulders. But that doesn't mean I agree with everything, my father continued, turning to Julian. You're her boss. There's a power imbalance here that concerns me. How do I know that Sophia is free to make her own decisions, that she doesn't feel obligated or cornered? I'm resigning, Julianne declared without a pause. Everyone in the room stared at him, including me. What? I breathed out. Julian, you can't quit your own company. I'm not quitting, he explained calmly. I'm resigning as your immediate supervisor. I'll have my partner transfer you to another department under a different manager. Or, even better, we'll promote you to project manager, like we should have done 6 months ago. That way, you'll have your own team and no conflicts of interest. Julian, that's not necessary. It's necessary, he interrupted me firmly, his gaze blazing with such conviction that it took my breath away. Your father is right. I never want you to feel trapped by work. I want you to be with me only because you want to, not because you have to. Mom came over and sat on the arm of the chair next to Dad. And you two? What is this, anyway? A fleeting affair amidst a scandal? Or a real marriage? I looked at Julian, searching for an answer in those dark eyes that saw in me what I didn't see in myself. He met my gaze, and a faint smile touched his lips. He squeezed my hand. It's real, we said in unison, then laughed at the perfect synchronicity. I don't know how this will all work out, I admitted, looking at my parents. I don't know if we'll be as sure in 6 months as we are now, or if we'll realize it was a moment of madness. But I know I want to try. I know that with Julian, I feel seen, valuable, just the way I am. And I'm not ready to give that up just because the time and place were strange. I love your daughter, Mr. Davis, Julianne said suddenly, and the words made the room feel both quiet and bright. Maybe it's too soon. Maybe I should have waited. But the truth is, I've been falling in love with her for months without even realizing it. In her laughter when she thinks she's not being heard, in the way she speaks to the cleaning lady and her billionaire client with the same respect, in the way she finds solutions where others see only dead ends. And yesterday, seeing her broken, I could think of only one thing. I will do anything to take this pain away from her, even if it means marrying her in front of 200 witnesses, without a second thought. Tears were already streaming freely down my cheeks. Julian turned to me and brushed them away with his thumbs. "I love you, Sophia Davis," he repeated, this time more quietly, "just for me. And I intend to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you were worth every risk I took." "I love you too," I whispered, and when those words left my lips, something inside me broke and healed in an instant. I don't know when it happened, maybe yesterday, maybe for these 3 years without me knowing, but it's the truth, the real truth. We kissed, softly, tenderly, forgetting for a moment that we were being watched. When our lips parted, Chloe clapped her hands, sobbing. Mom wiped her tears with a napkin. And Dad was smiling. Really. "Okay," he finally said, "you have my blessing. But," he raised a warning finger, "if you ever hurt my girl, Mr. Croft, there's no place on this planet for you to hide from me." "I don't plan to hurt her, sir," Julian replied seriously. "I plan to love her exactly the way she deserves. Every day. Always." Mom stood, brushing away the last of her tears. "Well, if you're going to do it properly. No living in sin. You're married, so now the most important part begins, getting to know each other, building a life. Just like everyone else." "Mom, we're already legally married," I reminded her carefully. "Legally, it's just paperwork," she waved her hand. "You need a blessing, and a proper honeymoon, and for Julian to meet the whole family under less extreme circumstances." "Patricia, breathe," her father interrupted with a grin. "Let the kids live for a moment." Chloe ran up and hugged me so tightly my ribs cracked. "I'm so happy for you," she whispered in my ear. "You deserve this, the whole fairy tale and more." "Thank you for being here," I whispered back, "for believing in me, even when I didn't." "Always, Soph. Always." The next few hours passed in a haze of conversation, endless cups of coffee, and slow, cautious acceptance. My father and Julian talked business, finding unexpected common ground. My mother peppered Julian with questions about his family, plans, and intentions, and I simply sat and watched, feeling something broken and aching inside me slowly mend, heal. When we finally got ready to leave, the sun was already setting outside, filling the sky with crimson and gold. Julian didn't start the car right away. He turned to me. "Are you okay?" "Better than okay," I answered honestly. "For the first time in a long time, I feel like everything is in its place. Even the part where your ex-boss professed his undying love to your parents? Especially that part." I smiled, and it felt so easy, so natural. "Although technically you're not my boss anymore, you're just my husband now." "Just my husband?" He squinted, tasting it. I liked the sound of that. "Me too." We kissed as the last rays of sun faded behind the horizon, sealing promises born in chaos, but forged in the most profound truth. We didn't know what lay ahead. We didn't know if the road would be smooth or bumpy, but we knew one thing with absolute, crystal clarity. What we found in each other was worth every risk, every moment of doubt, every sideways glance yet to be endured. Because sometimes the best stories begin in the most unexpected places. Sometimes love strikes when you least expect it, in the most unthinkable way, at the most inopportune moment. And sometimes all it takes is the courage to say yes when your very being screams for you to say no. I, Sophia Davis, came to my wedding to marry the wrong man. And I ended up marrying the one who was there all along, who waited in the wings to remind me I deserve to be loved, exactly as I am. And as we rode into our new, terrifying, and wonderful future, holding hands with identical smiles on our faces, we both knew with absolute certainty, Our story was just beginning, and it would be magnificent.